Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this flight again in the Spanish Pilot Skills Tour. And this is the leg 4. We are going to fly from Salamanca to Madrid to the General Aviation Airport of Madrid, which is called the Cuatro Vientos, which is the 4 winds in Spanish. Although that's probably the limit of my Spanish knowledge in any case. And today we are flying with a Cessna 172, so a very small trainer, general aviation plane, because the tour doesn't require us to do IFR, or there is no requirements to fly with a bigger plane. Actually, there is a requirement to fly with a small plane, and there is no route prescribed, only that we have to fly above a given VOR. But otherwise, it's going to be a VFR flight, so it's going to be something different than the other legs were before. I'm using the Spain UHD scenery, so there's going to be nice orthophotos. As you can see, the scenery is quite nice. The city of Salamanca is somewhere here. So the airport is a bit outside in a region where they are using watering to grow plants. And then we are going to leave to the south towards the mountains. Before we do and start anything, I'm going to check the mass and balance, and we are going to use full tanks because that's quite normal with the general aviation plane, that you just fill the tanks to maximum and then fly, and the next time again you fill maximum and fly. If there is no limit because of people in the airplane, so if you are within the allowed limits of the weight and balance chart, then it doesn't really matter if there is full fuel or not. So we are fine with full fuel. I've already filled our flight plan, and on WebEye I can see that there is actually air traffic control for the region of Madrid. So we will have to call them because both airports are controlled airports. They are in a controlled airspace, so we cannot just take off without saying something. And so we'll start up the plane, and then when the engine is running, then we will contact air traffic control and request taxi for our VFR flight. I'm flying with the Reality Expansion Pack Cessna, so it's the standard laminar X-Plane 11 Cessna, but with the expansion pack to make it more realistic. So we'll follow the procedures in this expansion pack also. I've also read the real life operation procedure manual Cessna, and they are more or less matching. There is nothing wrong with using this. Also, I'm using SkyDemon also in real life, and I've made a flight plan in SkyDemon, and you will not see it, but I will also use SkyDemon while we are flying to track my location. But I'm going to show you the flight plan as much as it's visible here. So first, an overview of the flight plan is here. So you can see that we take off from Salamanca, we'll depart to the south, and then follow a river, and then here a bit between the mountains head towards the east. Here's the VOR, and then from the VOR basically till the VFR entry point of the airport in Madrid, we will fly outwards a VOR radial. So there we'll use our radios a bit too for navigating. There is also something special here around the airport in Salamanca. There is a restricted area which is active during the weekdays, and now it's also activated by a NOTAM. So NOTAM is a specific message in which they sometimes let the pilots know that some areas are not allowed to fly through. And this is an area in this triangle where now we are only allowed to fly as high as 1,000 feet above the ground level. So we are not allowed to fly higher. This makes the, let's say, navigation a bit more difficult because you cannot see that much of the scenery around, so you are limited a bit more. And also you have to pay attention because you are not allowed to fly too high, but of course you don't want to fly too low because it becomes dangerous, especially if you have thermals or there is mountains around. But here our navigation is going to be easy because we are just following a river. so that shouldn't cause problems. And then later on, we are allowed to fly a bit higher. You can also see our altitude diagram. So you can see that at the beginning, this is ground level, and these hedged areas, I don't know how well it's visible in the stream, but those hedged areas are either restricted areas. Those are always restricted areas, so the hedged ones are restricted areas. And then here, the ones with this solid line border, those are the limits of of zones with air traffic control. So here we will stay under air traffic control. Those are arrival zones anyway to Madrid, so they are busy airspaces. And at the end, we will only enter the zone of Lima Echo Charlie Uniform, so the Cuatro Vientos airport. Otherwise, we'll be flying outside of the departure and the arrival airport. We'll be flying in uncontrolled airspace. But since there is a air traffic control in the area above us, we might ask for flight following or flight information services, which means that we stay on their radar, and it's a double. It means we are a bit more safe because if there is traffic nearby, they let us know. But we can also just ask to go to Unicom because in theory we are not in controlled airspace when we are flying there. Okay. So this is going to be our route, and I have this basically live, and now here I also have more detailed maps with time estimates and headings should that be necessary. And in a real flight you would do this planning indeed also, but I'm not going to use this here. I have that on my mobile next to me. It's not recorded, unfortunately. Maybe at one point I will set up the stream like that, but for now it's not recorded. Now for the departure, I will still show you the chart itself of Salamanca. So this is the VFR chart of Salamanca. We will depart from runway 21, so we'll depart from towards the south. So I expect that we will just immediately take a slight left turn and then join this departure route towards the VFR reporting point of Sierra, which is the Alba de Tormes point. It's called Alba de Tormes, probably just a village there. But we'll just fly over the highway, take a left turn, and then fly south above this river. And then when we are at the village, we can call that we are overhead, and then we are allowed probably to leave the frequency. Now, we'll also, so this is one chart we'll need when we depart, and the other chart we might need before, I will pull that up, is the taxi chart for Salamanca. And so that's here. So we'll take off runway 21. So we'll depart south. And well, we are here in the general aviation apron. We can just take off already from Charlie 2, but that says no entry, so we'll probably have to taxi all the way to the beginning and then take off from there. We'll see what the air traffic control tells us. But here we are in the general aviation apron and we'll depart to the south. Okay. Then we will start up the plane and then we will contract air traffic control and we'll see how that goes. And now there is no more air traffic control online on WebEye, so it's not going to happen anymore. Then I'm just going to see how it would happen in real life if they don't come back online. I'm going to have a quick look also here to see if it's not. No, there is only Unicom. It's a pity. It would have been interesting to see how it works out online. Okay, but then we can set up the plane. And if you have any questions during the flight, then please ask them in the chat and discuss. And I will sometimes look there and try to answer the questions as they come. Okay, so we are safely in the plane. We have closed the doors. We have removed chocks and everything that shouldn't be there when we are flying. We have set the parking brake, but I can test the brakes and then set the parking brake again. The fuel selector goes to both, so we will not use right or left only, but we will use them both. Now I think in some planes you only actually have some of these Cessnas right or left, so I'm not sure if this is very common to have a both selector in the Cessnas. In the small plane I'm flying with, there is no both selector, and there are a lot of planes where it's not available. So then there you really have to choose which fuel tank you are using. Okay, let's go further. The fuel shutoff valve is on, so it's in. Circuit breakers are not modeled in the laminar Cessna, but they are all in. So it means they are working well. Then we put the master switch on and the beacon lights on, which always in the general aviation plane tells everybody around that be careful, there is a startup imminent, so somebody is going to start the engines. So it tells everybody walking around, don't come too close, we are planning on starting up. Okay. And then to do the startup properly in the Cessna, you put everything else is off, the master switch is on, beacon lights is on, then fuel selector is on the center, then you open slightly the throttle. They say 1/4 of an inch, but it's basically slightly open. And then you turn on the fuel pump. Then you push in the mixture fully, which will start some fuel flow. You wait 3 seconds when there is enough fuel flow, and then you again fully lean the mixture and turn off the fuel pump. So that basically primes the engine, and then you can start. And then after you start, when there is a good start, you enrich the fuel fully, and then you stabilize on an RPM. So you will see when I do it. So we first put fuel pump on, then full push in the mixture. You see that there is a bit of fuel flow. After a few seconds, you kill it. The fuel pump goes back off, and now we can start. So I will go to start. And now I can see that I have made a small mistake, and you probably cannot hear the sound of the simulator. Ay ay ay. What to do, what to do. Ah, you can still hear it. Okay. It's just I cannot, because I've put it on the wrong channel. Anyway, we continue like this, it's gonna be fine. Not really going to be fine, because if there is ATC, then I cannot hear it through my headsets. Okay, I'm going to very quickly restart the simulator, because that's the only way I can switch the sound, unfortunately. Because if I start the simulator with the sound set to my external speakers, I cannot switch it back on while the simulator is on. Okay, give me 2 seconds and we will do it. We quickly stop the engine. So mixture goes to fully lean, then we turn off the light and the switches. This goes back. Okay, and then in 2 seconds I'm going to restart. I'm going to quickly disconnect from IVAO and then quickly restart the simulator. I'm very sorry for the delay. That was not planned. I was a bit rushed in the evening with dinner and everything. Okay, now it should be fine, and I will also hear things. So sorry about that. It's going to be loading in quite fast, so not gonna be a problem. And our flight plan is still fine. I will still resubmit that before we start flying, just to make sure that I'm not making a mistake with the tour. But as you have seen, the flight plan is done. So maybe this will be a time to ask questions if you have any while I restart the simulator. The flight itself is going to be 1 hour and 10 minutes, so not too long. And it's very good weather in Spain. Perfectly clear skies all the way to Madrid. And for the airport in Madrid, I have add-on scenery installed, which looks quite nice. I've checked it yesterday. Alright, we are back in the plane. Good. Then quickly again send the flight plan. It's already filled. Salamanca to Cuatro Vientos via NVS. November Victor Sierra. Everything is fine. Send flight plan. And then connect back with Oscar Oscar Papa Sierra Papa. Alright, we are back. Quickly check on WebEye if it's fine. I very much hope so, it will be. Okay, then we can continue where we left off. So just a quick check if our fuel tanks are full. Full, I'm there, and there is a bit of baggage, so that's fine. And then a quick check on our maintenance report. Everything is still fine. That's good. And I will just turn the voice of the simulator a bit down because it's going to be very loud if I leave it like this. So maybe the master's down here. How does this sound? Okay, that's better. Okay. Okay, so we start the plane. We were there, we were putting on the master switch, beacon lights goes on, fuel selector to both, and then the fuel flow throttle goes to a bit open, and then keep an eye on the fuel flow here. When I now turn on the fuel pump and then push in the mixture, then there's going to be fuel flow. And then we can wait for 3 minutes. That will prime the engine. And then we again kill the mixture, turn off the fuel pump, and then we can start. Now there is a chance, because it's the extension pack with the reality extension pack, that it remembers that I've already primed the engine, so we might flood it. We will see how it goes. So it might be that now we are not going to make a good start, but we'll see. Okay, so fuel pump goes on, then mixture goes on. You can see there is fuel flow. We wait a few seconds, we kill the fuel flow, fuel pump goes off, and now we will start. Yeah, we have a good start. And we stabilize the engine around 1000 RPM. Okay. Now we don't need navigation lights or strobe lights for now because we are still parked on the apron. We continue by putting the avionics on. Normally we would leave Squawk 2000, and also good evening for Sibe and Sierra Delta Lima 60. Thanks for watching. We are not going to put in a flight plan because we don't really have a flight plan, but I will still put in a direct route to the VOR and then to the airport, just to have a bit of a backup option, let's say, on the GPS. But we are not going to fly via the GPS itself, as I've already mentioned. Just a quick look at the checklist. Propeller starter was done. After engine, ignition switch on both. Mixture is rich. RPM is 1000 RPM. That's good. Oil pressure is in the green. We should have checked that immediately after start, because if you don't have the oil pressure in the green after start within a few seconds, then you might have to shut down the engine to avoid malfunction. The flaps are retracted now, avionics are on, and we will set the instruments. To set the instruments, we will go through the 6 basic instruments. So the airspeed indicator shows 0, the horizontal situation is on, we put that on the horizon. The QNH was 1011, so we'll set the QNH to 1011, that's good. We are at 2550 feet, that's correct for Salamanca. The turn coordinator is horizontal, there is no slide slip. Then we have to set our heading indicator, which should be more or less at 210 degrees. Let's say 2105, just before 210. Okay, and the vertical speed indicator is showing 0. So that's all correct, what we expect. And then here for the flight plan, we'll just enter the VOR was in our route. It was November Victor Sierra, if I remember correctly. Let's quickly check. November Victor Sierra, yes. So it's November Victor Sierra. And then we are just going to the airport, which is Lima Echo Charlie and Uniform, which might not be in like this, because in X-Plane in the database it's the other airport, which is the military apron of the same airport, which is called Lima Echo Victor Sierra. So that's the same airport. It's a bit like in Brussels, there is a different code for the military and the non-military aprons. So we have to go back then. Lima Echo, allez. Lima Echo Victor Lima Echo Victor and Sierra. Indeed, Cuatro Vientos, so the name is the same, so that's correct. And that's it, so that's our flight plan. We can zoom out slightly. Indeed, it seems to be going the right way, so that's fine. But we are not going to follow the magenta line because that's not what we are going to be flying now. And I would like to set this to face north up now, just for the visibility. So now it's north up, and this is the control zone of Salamanca. So that we will leave to the south, as I've shown it on the map already. Now I will put up the VFR chart for Salamanca. So this is the southwards exit we will take. We will take off runway 21 and then take the exit to the south, overflying Sierra Alba de Tormes. That's the plan. There is still no ATC. No, there is no ATC, but we are visible on WebEye. Good. So we will not have to say anything. But what would now happen in real life is that we would contact the tower here in Salamanca and say first Oscar Oscar Papa Sierra Papa Salamanca Tower, good evening. Then they would be saying Oscar Oscar Papa Sierra Papa, go ahead. And then I would be saying Oscar Oscar Papa Sierra Papa at the general aviation apron of Salamanca. But if I'm talking to the tower, I wouldn't say at Salamanca, then I would just say at the general aviation apron. Cessna 172 requesting taxi for VFR flight to Madrid Cuatro Vientos, exit via Sierra at 3,500 feet. Then they would copy it and give us taxi instructions, and also a QNH probably. Now, since there is nobody to give us taxi instructions, I will clear us for taxi myself, and that's gonna be to runway 21, and runway 21 is via now, oops, via, you'll taxi via Tango to Charlie 1, because you cannot take off from Charlie 2 or Charlie 4, those are not allowed, so we have to go all the way to Charlie 1. Okay, so we are going to go to Charlie 1. Then left and right is clear. We put the taxi lights on before we start moving, parking brakes go off, and then we are going. When we go right, we check that our horizontal indicator turns to the right and there is flip to the left. That's how we confirm that that indicator is working properly. Also the gyro is moving, and also the magnetic compass is moving. So these are the things we look at during taxi. So we'll take here the exit Charlie 7, and then we'll take the parallel taxiways to go to the end of the runway. So here first, it's called Charlie 7 on the actual map, so it's a bit weird. It was called Charlie 3 in the scenery, but it's a default scenery, so small mistakes are fine. And then we'll go right all the way to Charlie 1 via Tango. We'll look left, right, everything's clear. And while we are on the ground, normally you would also lean the engine till you can see the RPM rising till a while, and then if you lean it too much, then the RPM drops. So you want to lean the engine just to maximum power. So that's where the RPM is still stable and higher. And then you can also pull back a bit the throttle, and that just means that your fuel consumption on the ground will be lower. It depends on what plane you're flying. It's in the manuals how you should lean the engine on the ground, or should you not. So while we are doing the long taxi, we can already prepare for takeoff. We'll do takeoff in takeoff configuration. So that's flaps 10 degrees. We already we'll set 7,000 for squawk. Normally, if you are flying out from a controlled airspace, they would give you a squawk, and then when you leave it, you would switch to 7,000 for VFR, or stay if you are asking for flight following or flight information services. Depends. So for the departure, we will not need this map anymore. The only thing we will need is the VFR chart. And I should maybe taxi a bit slower. Because our ground speed is picking up. So we'll apply a bit of brakes. And here is the map. So we'll take off straight, then after the highway or around the highway here, take a left turn, and then when we enter the area above the river, we'll just follow the river to the south. So it's quite straightforward. We can check the speeds, so we can rotate around 55 knots with this airplane. And then for the climb, we can climb around 79 knots. So that's what we will be aiming for, a climb between 70 and 80 knots. There is not much terrain ahead here, so we don't have to do best rate or best angle of climb. We are not really limited by the terrain features for that. It doesn't really matter here. Okay, I'm just here before the holding point. So we are at runway 21, as we should be. Before we take off, we put the mixture to fully rich, because we are still below 3,000 feet, and you shouldn't lean the mixture for takeoff below that altitude in a Cessna. Then normally when you're stopped, you take also you turn off the taxi lights too. And now that we are here, we can still do a run-up. So brakes go off, and then we will do a run-up. So the run-up is to check if your engine is operating properly. So the parking brakes are set. We can also have a look at our flight controls. So you move the stick, the yoke left and right, and then you check if all the ailerons and the elevators are working. For the elevators, it's a bit, I don't know, you can actually see it nicely from the Cessna, and also the rudder. So all the flight controls are free. That's good. The elevator trim is set for takeoff, so this is for the takeoff position. Mixture is rich. The autopilot, you can check disconnect, which means you first turn on the autopilot and then you turn it off, and then you confirm that you can turn off the autopilot. It would be really not nice if you couldn't turn off the autopilot. It would be very dangerous when you're flying. Then we go with the throttle to 1800 RPM. And then we check our magnetos. So the magnetos are necessary to operate the engine, and if one of them is not good, you would notice that during the magneto check. So we first go right, then there should be a small drop, because now there is only one half of the starter in the engine is working, only half of the magnetos. Then you go back to both, it goes back to 1800, then go to left, again a small drop, and that you can observe this small drop with both positions show you that both of the magnetos are operational. And then there is for all small planes, are the limits how big this drop should be and what the difference between the maximum difference between the two drops can be. Okay, then we go back to idle. So it's fully down for the throttle, and then we check that idle is still holding stable. Okay, idle is holding stable. We can go back to 1000 RPM. That's good. And we also check that there is a proper suction. So that's here, that's in the green. That's good. That's a vacuum in the green. The ammeters is in positive, so that means that the battery is charging. And the temperature, the oil temperature is in the green already. This means we can take off. So everything is fine. We are ready for departure. Flaps are set, and the mixture is rich. So now, normally we would report to the tower, Oscar Oscar Papa Sierra Papa, ready for departure at holding point Charlie 1, runway 21. And they would say, okay, Oscar Oscar Papa Sierra Papa, cleared for takeoff, runway 21, and then tell us the winds. But still, there is still no tower. Just a quick check, there is no tower. So I've cleared ourselves and we can go. So we set the brake off, taxi lights on, landing lights on. We also put the strobe lights now and the nav lights just for better visibility. Normally during the day you would not need the nav lights, but we do it. Always better to be seen. And also put the transponder to mode alt. And then we can go. So the takeoff, rotate at 55 knots, and then initial climb 79 knots. And departure to the south. Good. I will close this. I will put maybe the map here. Just a quick reminder, we take off this direction, runway 21, small left turn, and then fly south above the river. When you come to the runway, you would have already checked that the approach path is clear, and then line up with the center line. Confirm it's runway 21. We are pointing towards 21, so it's confirmed, and we can go maximum power. Keep the center line with the rudder. Airspeed is alive. .55 knots, rotate. And then we still let the airspeed grow, and then we will aim at between 70 and 80. We'll try to stay on the center line. There is a bit of wind from the right, so we have to turn a bit towards the right. And we will only climb to 3,500 feet because we have to stay within 1,000 feet from the ground. So we shouldn't climb higher. Okay, we are 400 feet above ground. We do flaps up. Our speed was checked. It's good. Flaps up. And we just keep to this heading. And normally, when we leave the airspace, we would also turn the landing lights off. But we can already do that. It's fine. There is quite some turbulence up here. And I will very quickly lower the volume because it's a bit too much, I find. But after we have reached our altitude of 3,500 feet. Okay, so we are leveling off. Push the nose a bit down. Let the airspeed rise. And then pull back the power a bit. 2,300 RPM is good. 2,200, 2,300. And then trim the airplane so that I don't have to put pressure on the stick anymore. Okay. And then we can make a turn left because here is the highway. And that's the river we need to follow. So there's the river. So we'll just fly towards there, keep 3,500 feet. Going to put the volume tiny bit lower. Okay, I hope this is fine for those who are listening too. They can hear me and the engine noise is not too much. So you can see here in the GPS that we are soon going to be leaving the control zone of Salamanca. It's actually the outer one. And when we leave, then we can switch to either we can tune away from the frequency of the tower. So they will say clear to leave the frequency. Okay, and now we'll follow the river. And on my Sky Demon, I can always see how high we are allowed to fly, because there I can actually see how high the terrain is. I'm going to make sometimes corrections and slight climbs when it's necessary. But normally you would have those altitudes on a VFR chart in real life. So if there is such a limitation that you need to be 1,000 feet, maximum 1,000 feet above the ground, then you would have to know how high the ground is, of course. And in these small planes, there is no terrain radar, which could tell you, or a radar-based altimeter, which could tell you how high you are flying. So of course, it would be a bit different than from an Airbus or a Boeing when you can actually know that. Of course, you would never fly a Boeing or an Airbus for a long time, only 1,000 feet above the ground. There is quite a lot of thermals today. I cannot just leave the plane trimmed. I have to sometimes fight with the up and downward motion of the air. And why is that? It's a special add-on that I have in X-Plane. It's called Thermal X or X Thermals. I think I've already mentioned it 2 streams ago. And it's a very nice add-on which injects thermals, very realistic thermals, into real-time weather in X-Plane. Because normally if you use X-Plane in real-life weather setting, then there is no thermals. And it's very unrealistic, because then in a day like this you would really be flying straight on level without any kind of an input, and that's just not realistic. And now with this now I will let go the stick, and if we wait a bit, then probably there's gonna be a push left and right or up and down. See, there is now a push left. I have not done anything. So this is a thermal. You can also see that the vertical speed is going up. And now I will correct. So I will push it a bit down and go back right. And now we have left the thermal and it went back right. I can actually visualize these in X-Plane, these thermals, by cycling through Control M. Now you see the thermals. And this is not only thermals, but also because we are flying very close to the terrain, there is effects coming from the terrain. So there is wind, and the wind is perturbed by the geographical features. By the way, we are now overhead the VFR reporting point. So this village here is the VFR reporting point. So when you are in real life flying here, you would say Oscar Oscar Papa Sierra Papa overhead Sierra, requesting to leave frequency. And then they would say, frequency change approved, bye bye, or something like that. And then here we would tune to a different frequency. Now we are in Unicom in the simulator, so it doesn't matter. We don't have to make a change. But in real life, for example, we would tune to Madrid information, or I don't know what's that called here in Spain, and then you could request flight following. Since we are in uncontrolled airspace, they will not give us instructions, but that would mean that they give us maybe a squawk code and that they follow us on the radar. And then if traffic nearby, they would remind us to look out for the traffic. So that's like an extra level of safety in real life flying. I'm just going to put back the yoke so you can see if I make input, and you can also see if there is a thermal which changes our heading and altitude without me making some control inputs. Normally we can do one more thing now that we are cruising basically and following the river here. And for a while, we are going to be staying in this 3,500 feet until we get closer to the mountains. Then we will climb a bit higher. So what we can do is, we can lean the engine. Leaning the engine means that we let more air and less fuel into the chamber. And that's why it's good, because it's good for our fuel consumption. So now you can see we are burning quite some, or using quite some fuel. Our fuel flow is on the top of the green range. But we actually don't need that much fuel. We can lean the engine, and that you do with the mixture. So that's what the mixture does. And in the Cessnas, you can use the exhaust gas temperature. So this EGT marker, you can use this to know how much you should lean the engine. So they say in the manual, if I'm correct, but again, this is not an instructional video. I don't fly Cessna in real life, so I'm not fully aware of the proper procedures. But if I'm correct, you can lean the engine to 50 degrees below peak. What does this mean? So leaning the engine 50 degrees below peak means that you can start leaning the engine and have a look how the temperature of the exhaust gas changes. So this is the exhaust gas temperature, and every tick mark here is 25 degrees Fahrenheit. So if I now, let's say, start pulling the mixture a bit out, so if I lean the mixture, you can see that the fuel flow is dropped and the exhaust gas temperature started going up. Now we can do this very slowly, further and further, and monitor how the exhaust gas temperature changes. And we can do this basically to find the peak of the exhaust gas temperature, but we do this very slowly because if you over lean the engine, then the engine will stop, and then we are not very high above the ground, and we have to make sure it restarts, so you wouldn't do this very violently. So now I pushed more, and you can see that it's dropping back. So I have leaned too much. Then with this dial, you can actually set where the peak was. It was more or less here. And then now we are lean of peak. It means we have leaned beyond the peak. That means that the white dial dropped back from the peak. So now we have to reach it. And I do that by pushing in the mixture. You can see that the exhaust gas temperature now climbs. Now it's at the peak, and if I push the mixture more in, then the exhaust gas temperature starts dropping again. And when we are like 2 white tick marks below, that means we are 50 degrees below. And then you can see that our fuel flow is like 7 gallons per hour, which is a very good fuel flow for a Cessna in cruise. So this is how you optimize your fuel flow and the engine mixture, the fuel mixture. Hi Sander, thanks for joining. I'm happy that you're also watching. And welcome Real Placer also. Yeah, there are a lot of people in the chat who actually speak Dutch. So I hope they will, for you, also speak English a bit. I speak English, so you can always ask questions in English. And I know, Sander, that you are a fan of Pilot Bass. I've seen you there in the chat a lot. He is now real life flying on a holiday, so he has some nice time. I've seen that he was flying in Germany today. Okay, now we are getting closer to a big lake here, and I think this is an artificial lake. So they used it to generate electricity. And it's fine that we are climbing a bit higher because now the terrain is getting a bit higher, so there is no problem. I can see it on Sky Demon that we are well within the range where we are allowed to be flying. So there is nothing wrong with that. We are not using the GPS today, it's just there as a backup. So you see that we have left the area southwards, and then at one point we'll turn east. And for the approach, today it's a pilot skill tour, and it's a stage of the pilot skill tour, but this is very different pilot skill than the previous IFR flights were. In the previous flights, mostly the approaches were the difficult. But here it's about the navigation, because the approaches are very standard VFR approaches. You approach the airspace, you contact the controllers if they are there, you request landing instructions, you follow the instructions, probably have to join a circuit in a given direction, and then it's landing a small plane. So it's, in that sense, maybe for me at least, a much easier one than flying a complex approach with a Boeing and an Airbus. I will try to show again these thermals I've been talking about, if you can see them nicely. So I will activate the visualizing of the thermals and microbursts. There are no thermals here, it seems. It's strange. Or they, yeah, okay, now it's loaded in. Now it's gone away. Yeah, because we are, yeah, very nice. Above water, there are no thermals. So the simulation, this extra plugin I'm using, when you're flying above water, it cancels out the thermals. And actually in real life, it's like that too. So above the water, you will never really get thermals, because the thermals always form above warm ground. And of course, you need some temperature difference in the different air layers above ground for the thermals to form. But that's also modeled in this extra add-on, that when you are flying above water, then you don't have thermals. And then you can see here in the visualization that where these lines in the atmosphere are red, there is a small downward force. And then where they are yellow or green, there is a strong upward motion. So there are thermals and also the airflow coming from the ground. So that's how the atmosphere is much more, let's say, alive with this plugin. Well, but so it explains by standard in real-time weather, the thermals are not modeled. You can add them when you set up a manual weather profile. But for example, these upward or downward motions, because of the geographical features, so the terrain, that's modeled. So that's actually why you sometimes see these lines going up and down without actually seeing a thermal, because that's how the terrain winds are modeled. So that, for example, ridge lifting is a kind of thermal induced, terrain induced wind. So if there is a hill and there is air coming from one side of the hill, so there is a wind coming from one side of the hill, then the hill will push the air up, and that's, for example, used by the glider pilots to like fly along mountain ridges, because on one side of these mountain ridges, on the side from where the wind is coming, there is updrift, so the air is going up there, and they can use that very nicely to fly along mountains. And then thermals, that's a different story. That's really because of temperature differences and movements of the air from in really a vertical kind of direction, which causes them. There is some physics behind it. I'm not exactly sure I can explain that. But that's the classical circular updraft of air. We are very soon going to leave the area where we are only allowed to fly 1,000 feet above the ground. So that's going to be more or less after that rim there. And then we can climb higher. Then we will be only limited 2,000 feet above ground. So there we will do some climbing. You see also here in the GPS, I have the airspace boundaries. I'm going to switch off the thermals. So I have the airspace boundaries, and this boundary here is the boundary within which during weekdays you are limited to 1,000 feet above ground. So when we are out of there, then we go to this other airspace. There, the limitation is 2,000 feet. I don't know what the exact reason is for this limitation here, why you are not allowed to fly higher. There is usually a description in the NOTAMs. I don't know why that is on this specific location. It's usually because there are like military exercises higher, or there are multiple reasons it can be. Alright, and then here the river takes a turn to the left, and we will follow the river to the left for a while. In the meantime, we can also tune the radios to the VOR, because there will be a VOR we have to fly over, and that's going to be actually here where the GPS track ends, because now it just shows our next leg in the flight plan. So that's November Whiskey Sierra, that's the VOR. And we can tune our radio. So I can check what the frequency of the VOR is. And we shouldn't fly too much higher than we are now here, because then we are going to be more than 1,000 feet above, and we are not yet allowed to go higher. So here's this river we need to follow. And now we have a bit of a tailwind. So even though our displayed speed is not that good, we are actually going faster towards Madrid. Okay, we shouldn't go much higher than 4,000 here. I will trim a bit the aircraft and pull the power a bit back. Okay, so the frequency, we don't need this anymore. The frequency for the VOR is going to be 114.95. So we go here, do a switch, 114.95. 114.95. Okay, and now it's tuned, so it says November Victor Sierra. And actually I can also derive on which radial we are from the VOR by rotating this knob, and at one point, yeah, now the dial is centered, so that means we are flying on that radial, and we are flying from, so we are flying towards in this direction, so it's at 100 degrees, so 100 direction is the VOR, and indeed that's 100. So even if we didn't have a GPS, that's how we would know which direction we are from the VOR. For a while we are going to turn south here, but now we are allowed to climb, so we are going to climb to 5,000 feet. And how do you climb in such a small airplane? You put the mixture. Well, you can leave the mixture, we are already a bit higher. Oh no, for climb, you put the mixture to fully mix, then you put the throttle to maximum, and then we can pitch to the climb speed, which is around 80 degrees. So you can really pitch up. There's not going to be anything bad about that. You pitch up, and then you wait till the speed drops to 80, and then you let the nose drop a bit, and then you aim with the pitch to 80. So you don't change the speed. With the pitch, you can change basically the speed. So you pitch for speed. Now we'll climb to 5,000 feet. And the extra height is always safety. So as soon as you're allowed to climb higher, then why not? The more air you have below you, the more height is below you, the more safe your flight is. Because if there is an engine failure, then there is a higher area where you can find either an airport to land or a field to make an emergency landing. And also, when you are in max power, you should apply some right rudder. You can see if I don't apply rudder, then the ball is to the right, so we are not in coordinated flight. But if I apply some right rudder, then you can see that now we are fully coordinated because the ball is in the center. In the real plane, you can actually feel that there is like a bit of sidewards pressure on your backside if you don't do this. And now we are at 5,000 feet, we can level off. And then let the airspeed gain a bit. And then when you are fast enough, then you can pull back the power to cruise power. So now we are at 100 knots, we can pull back the power to like 2,300 RPM. 2,250, that's fine. And then we will fly a bit more south here at 5,000 feet. And then of course you need to trim the aircraft again, because now at a different altitude the density is different, speed is different, so the trim setting is going to be different. And basically we'll turn west like somewhere here. So we're not going to fly over the big mountains, but we'll still want to be beyond this ridge. So after this ridge, we'll turn left. We don't want to climb much further because we can get too high, and we don't want that. Not that easy to trim the aircraft properly in the simulator. It's much easier, I think, in real life. Okay, we can have a look out from outside too. So we fly here around and then in the valley there. So we already tuned the radio to the VOR. We have to fly above. And you can see that since we are not following the radial on which we were, so now we are basically flying perpendicular to the radials. Every time if I tune to the radial, it's gonna not stay centered because we are not flying along the radials. When we will pass above the VOR, then on the outward radial we will follow a radial, and that will take us to the entry reporting point to the airport of Madrid, the Cuatro Vientos, because that's a requirement for this leg of the pilot skill tour. So I find it quite nice that there are different legs with IFR and VFR mixed, so it's always something else. There is a bit of a challenge. You have to look up the approaches or the procedures, make a plan. I like doing that. For me, flying the simulator is really trying to follow the procedures as realistically as possible. Of course, sometimes I also just turn it on and then do crazy things I wouldn't do in a real plane, because that's also something you should be doing in a simulator. You can have fun in a simulator. You don't have to take everything totally seriously. But for this tour, the pilot skill tour, I like to try to follow the procedures quite realistically. And that's the valley we will fly into. So after this ridge, we'll turn left and then head westwards. Gonna have a quick look on the IVAO. If on the WebEye there is still no ATC, unfortunately, so we'll not have to talk so far to air traffic control. Alright, we can turn left, not too close to the mountains, because then you can have again these thermals, not real thermals, but winds perturbed by the mountains, and that can be dangerous because the wind can change very fast. So normally you would not want to fly too close to the mountains. But for a while here the terrain will also become higher and higher, so we'll have to climb a bit with the plane too. And you see that I have not leaned the mixture, so now our fuel flow is very high, so I will again lean. And we are higher now, so the peak of the exhaust gas temperature wouldn't be here. So normally, if you want to lean the mixture properly, you would again first have to find where the peak of the exhaust gas temperature is, at which setting, and then go back with the mixture a bit to be 50 degrees below. So you can again keep an eye on the gauge. If I start leaning the mixture, the fuel flow drops and the exhaust gas temperature is rising. I will still want to see where we are flying, so I'm not going to zoom out that much. But again, slowly leaning the mixture, you can see that the temperature is rising. And at one point, the temperature is going to peak. I'm pulling back the mixture very slowly because I don't want to do it too violently. Okay, the peak is still there, and now it starts to drop very fast. Now I over leaned it, so we go back. Now I'm enriching the mixture, and I will enrich until it drops like 50 degrees below the peak. So here, this is good. And this is a very good setting for the engine. It's very healthy setting, and it's also low fuel flow. So you're not using too much fuel. And now we'll have to fly in that valley. In that valley? Right. Yes, in that valley. Yeah, I know that this flight is not the most exciting, I think, because it's, well, in real life, this would be really nice because now you would have time to look around, take some pictures, and when you're flying VFR, you always have to look around, but it's not like having to program an approach to the FMC of the Airbus or the Boeing. I think as a viewer, this might not be that exciting, to be honest. It's still very nice to fly it, for me at least. But I can understand if for a stream this is not the most exciting. The next leg is going to be a flight to Gibraltar. So that's going to be with a bigger plane. I have not decided yet what plane I'm going to use. But it's definitely going to be a bigger plane. And there we will do again a flight plan where we depart VFR because there is no IFR departure from this airport in Madrid. And then we'll switch to IFR for the main portion of the flight, and then at the very end we'll do a visual approach, and that can still, I mean, that constitutes to as visual flying, but I don't think there is a need to make a flight plan change there anymore because it's in the approach phase. But there normally they ask you to fly the VFR approach. Okay, now we can climb to 6,500 feet because the terrain is coming higher and we need to pass above that pass, so we'll climb to 6,500 feet. And again, as I said, for the climb, we go full mixture, full power, and then you pitch for 80 knots. So we still pitch higher because the speed can be still lower for a good climb speed. And we can also, so if I now let the yaw go, then we come down, pitch down, that's not good. So I can just trim the aircraft while in the good pitch. And then it will stay like that even if I let the yaw go. So now it's more or less the good pitch. We are at 80 knots. I let the yaw go and the airplane is still holding the pitch. It means it's trimmed well for this climb. And I can also give a bit of a right rudder, which I always forget in the simulator. And then we are also in coordinated flight because the ball here in the turn coordinator is in the center. Okay, so we will climb till 6,500 feet here. A bit less, bit lower pitch because the climb performance is not very good. It was very warm when we took off, so the warmer the air is, the worse the climb performance in these small planes. And this is going to be, a bit of wind. This is going to be our highest altitude today, so 6,500 feet. This is high enough to climb over the terrain. Alright, we can level off. I push the nose down. And then I wait till we gain speed. And then when we have achieved some stable speed, I will trim the airplane for that position. So now I really have to push the nose down because now we are flying against the trim. And you can see that the speed is rising. I will also pull back now. This is going to be more or less our cruise speed, so I can pull back the power to 2300-ish and then trim the aircraft. We can fly a bit more to the right because that's where the pass is. There is definitely still quite some wind, and I think it's mostly not thermals but mostly wind from the mountains. It's like there is the wind flow coming from behind us, and as the wind climbs over the mountains, there is like waves in the atmosphere. So that's throwing us around lightly. Quite some nice mountains here to the right. Must be really nice to fly this route also in real life. Well, I'm actually curious how the new flight simulator is for these small VFR flights. It's probably very nice. I will probably buy it this evening or tomorrow and then download and then make some comparisons. I'm curious. I've seen it looks very pretty, but I'm curious how well the default planes fly, so I'm a bit afraid about that. But it's sure that when you're flying low and slow like today's flight, that's gonna be very pretty with the new flight simulator. The question is if it's just pretty or if it's also well modeled for these small planes. So I'm curious about that. Might stream about that also in the next few days if I manage to set up everything properly. But this also doesn't look bad with the orthophotos and stuff. The atmosphere is definitely not as nice as in the new flight simulator. But when you install these orthophotos, it also looks very nice. But it's true that for having these orthophotos for Spain, I almost have 700 gigabytes of space filled with these orthophotos, and that's just crazy. So you cannot have that for the whole world. So I'm sure if in like a half year or a year, new paver planes come out which have really nice modeling, or for the systems too, then the new flight simulator will definitely be very good. And then I'm curious to see what the X-Plane will do about it. What's the answer going to be from X-Plane? Because now that would be perfect if these planes like the Tolis or the Zibo or these planes with the reality expansion plaque would be available in the new flight simulator, in the graphics of the new flight simulator. That would be the best, of course. But it will still take some time till that becomes reality. Somewhere to the right there is a heliport. I don't know if you can see it from here. I don't know. And now this was the highest point also of the terrain below us. You can see now from here on there is a bit of a descent. But we'll still stay at the... Now we will start descending a bit. So to descend, just at normal setting, you push back a bit the power. I mean, you pull back the power and then you just let the plane descend. Not accelerate too much, but just let it descend a bit. So see now it also stays the pitch. I'm not even touching the controls. And it's stabilized around 95 knots and we are descending with 700 feet per minute. I can pull the pitch a bit up and then descend like with 500 feet per minute and then it's a bit faster. So this is like an en route descent. We are still 30 nautical miles from the VOR, so that's gonna be here. The VOR is here, this is our distance. And the radial is 272 based on the GPS. So if I rotate this to 272, then indeed we are aligned with the radial. Okay, maybe we don't have to descend that fast. And I will also prepare a message for the airport where we arrived there, but I'm the only one arriving, so I'm not going to do that. Nobody else is flying now to Cuatro Vientos. Okay, but we still need to descend further, so let's not stay level too much. Just we don't have to descend too fast. So like 500 feet per minute is definitely enough. So it's again, now we pitch, the speed doesn't really matter as long as it's in the green arc, but we can just, with a set power setting, pitch for the necessary vertical speed. And then trim the plane to stay in that vertical speed. Now I want to be somewhere around 500, so this is more or less okay. And the speed is still good. But you can see that sometimes when we fly close to a ridge, then there are sudden changes in the vertical speed, and that's really because of this wind being thrown around by the slopes of the mountains. It will descend to 4,500. That's a good altitude. It's below the limit and it's high above the terrain. So at 4,500 we level off. And I think before we arrive to Madrid, we'll still have to climb over one of these ridges, if I remember correctly. I think I've done this actually, this flight last year. I've done the VFR tour of Spain, and I have this memory that I think I've done the exact same flight then. but I'm not sure. But I know that I've been arriving to this very same airport from the west. Maybe not from Salamanca, but it was a similar flight. And here, no, here there is a lake here in the distance. We'll still have to fly above that and then a bit further. Okay, we are coming to 4,500, so we pitch up, raise the power, and we level off at 4,500. Good. And we can keep this altitude for a while now. And maybe now we have some time to look at the arrival VFR chart. So that's for not this one, but this one. So arriving here to Madrid with a general aviation plane is not so straightforward, I have to say. And that's mostly because there is quite a lot of traffic here. So you can see that we are close to Barajas. So this big yellow blob is Madrid. And then on the east half of Madrid, there is Madrid Barajas. So these four runways are the runways of Madrid Barajas. And some of these areas are in the missed approach path of Madrid. So for example, this area, I think, is the area where planes would turn if they have to do a go around or if their approach was not successful. So that's why there are given corridors where you can arrive with a VFR plane, and the corridors are very low above the ground because higher up the airspace is for big planes. And we'll arrive via November, and you can see that the maximum altitude here from November to the airspace of the airport is 3,000 feet. And you can also see, so this is 3,000 feet, but you can see that here, for example, the terrain is at 2,466. So you are only 500 feet above ground, and you are not allowed to come in higher. Now, so this is a route which is in and out too, so there is two-way traffic here. Then there is a route here at 3,500, which is a bit higher, but this is only outwards traffic. And then there is one here which is in and out. So again, both that no, which is just in, but it's from the south, and this is a bit higher. But we will fly from this northern because it's more straightforward from the position we are coming from. But so we'll come basically following this highway till this junction, and then we will just keep flying on the same radial, looking at our VOR instrument. And then when we are above November, we'll fly straight direct to the airport and then join the left-hand downwind and then land. So we'll fly here, fly across. But normally if there would be ATC, then they would tell us exactly how to join the traffic pattern. But since there is no special directions given, there are no special directions given on the chart, we will assume that we need to fly a left-hand pattern. So we arrive from here, we'll basically already join on the crosswind leg, then fly the downwind and then turn left for base and then final again left turn for landing. I've checked that the runway 27 was active in Madrid for this airport today. There is a slight wind, not too much. So that's how our final approach is going to be to Madrid. We are not that far away anymore. I guess within 20 minutes we'll be landing. Yeah, normally I would have written down times every time we cross a feature that was included in the flight plan, But since this is a simulator, I have not done this, so I have not tracked exactly how we are according to plan. We are a bit late or not. Then I will lean the engine a bit. Okay, this is good. And also you can see that there are these red areas. These are parts of villages where you are not allowed to fly above. So it's a bit difficult to come to this November VFR point because you're not allowed to fly above this. So you have to fly on the right side of these villages, then you are above November, and then you fly inwards. So I'm pretty sure that in real life it's not so straightforward if you're flying there the first time. But I'm sure we will manage. Okay, we need to fly towards that river, so that's the outflow, I guess. Yeah, so there is the whole river under us. Don't know if I can see it. Yeah, so there is a lake, and then the river flows out of the lake down towards Madrid. It doesn't go all the way to Madrid, but it basically goes. So the VOR instrument is just beyond the water, somewhere there. I can tune to the direction of the VOR. Now it's at like 285. Indeed, it says the GPS says 284. So it's more or less the same. It's correct. And you can also see on the Garmin 530 that we are getting closer. So this is the complex airspace of so this is the complex airspace of Madrid. We are getting closer. Now what we can do is we can really fly on the VOR radial. So I will stop looking at, well, not stop looking because we are doing VFR flying. But now, basically with this instrument, I can tune to the radial. So when it's all crossed, then it means that we are flying inbound the radial. And then doesn't mean that we are flying inbound the radial. It means we are on that radial where we are tuned to. To fly inbound on that radial, we have to make sure that our heading, well, now actually is in that direction. So I will actually tune it differently. So rotate 180 degrees. Now we are flying towards. So you can see that the instrument says now we are flying to the VOR. Oops. Allez. And then we have to make sure to fly really towards that our heading or our track is the same where this is pointing. So now you can see that we are flying at a heading of 10 something and the VOR is at 10, no, actually at, yeah, it's at 105-ish. So our track, that's the direct track, that's not what we want to see. Anyway, so if the dial goes to the right, we have to correct to the right. Because that means that the radial we want to fly inwards is moving to our right. So then we turn a bit to the right. And then we will let that white marker to come back to the center. So now you see that the direction would be between east and 12, and now we are flying more to the right, so towards 12, 120. That means that we are flying towards the radial itself. Now it's in the middle, so we can correct back, turn a bit left, that we really fly towards the VOR itself. It sounds maybe a bit complex without having figures here to show how this works. But this is the basics of VOR navigation. Okay, it's fine that we are descending to 4000, but at 4000 we'll level off again. So we are 4 minutes from the VOR based on SkyDemon. And more or less 8 minutes, no, 12, 13 minutes from the airport. And now we are perfectly flying along the VOR because our track is the same as the dial setting here, and the dials, the VOR is vertical here. And just to confirm, that's what the GPS is telling us we are flying towards. And don't bother, I've not activated the correct step in the flight plan, so it already thinks we are flying from November Victor Sierra to the airport. That's why there is this weird display here. It doesn't matter, we are not using this. So we would only use the GPS or anything in the flight plan set here if you would use the autopilot. Okay, we are at 4,000 feet, so we should level off here. Good. We're still flying towards the VOR, nicely aligned. A bit more to the left maybe, because now the dial seems to move to the left a bit. Okay, we are 2 minutes from being overhead the VOR. So I should maybe able to see it. Don't know if I can find it. Yeah, it's there. Oops. I had it. Yeah. Difficult to... It's there. It's just down there. I'm not sure anything was visible from that on the stream itself. And I see that the closer we get to the VOR, the more sensitive this dial gets, because the closer the radials are to each other. Now we are 2 nautical miles from the VOR, so everything gets very fast here. The radials change very fast. Now we will not want to fly exactly along it because it's impossible. And I'm fully hand flying today, so we have not used the autopilot for 1 second. Okay, we are just flying above the VOR. If I can have a quick look down. Ah, it's down there. So that's the VOR. So that shows that we have navigated nice. And now we turn west. And that's the highway we want to follow for a while. If I'm right. We can still stay at 4,000 feet for a bit. So we can have a quick look at the before landing procedures. So seat belts are set. Fuel selector is still both. The engine parameters we'll check, of course. They are all in the green, so that's good. The altimeter, yeah, we should see what's the altimeter. In Lima Echo Victor Sierra, I think that's only in Cuatro Vientos 1011, so that has not changed. And I think here the transition level is also higher, so it's correct that we didn't switch the baro to standard. And it's 33 degrees, so that's warm. Wind is, there is quite some strong wind. 10 knots with gusts up to 20 and variable directions, so that might be an interesting landing even with a small plane. That's quite some wind, but luckily it's more or less aligned, so well, it could be side wind, crosswind too, because if it's at exactly 170, that's a lot of crosswind. So the runway is at 27, so it's gonna be quite some crosswind. Okay, it's gonna be an interesting landing, most likely. But the challenge is good. Okay, so the QNH is fine. That's set. Can go back to the approach chart. So we are now approaching from this direction. This is the highway under us. Is here. Oops. And there, that turn of the highway is here. From that turn, we'll just directly fly more or less west. And then at the November entry point, we'll probably see the airport from there. So from there, it's gonna be easier. There is quite some gusts already here. I can feel it. The airplane is yawning left and right. And more or less 2-3 minutes from that point on the highway based on Sky Demon. So we can also descend slowly to 3000 feet. I will put the mixture already to fully rich. So that's not something we'll forget when we are there. The radios are set. We are still on Unicom. There is still nobody else flying there, so we don't have to say anything. Let's quickly check that. Oh yeah, oh no, there is only another inbound flight. Nobody else on the ground, so that's fine. Okay. And from there on we know it. So the approach speed will fly it with 65 knots, or 70 knots, between 65 and 70. And then for touchdown it's around 60, 50, between 50 and 60 touchdown. Okay. For lights, we normally only put the landing lights on when we are clear to land. So we'll try to remember that on final. And we are descending further to 3000 feet. Don't have to do it very fast. We can first go to 3500. That's the upper limit of the airspace we are soon going to be entering. There, the upper limit of that airspace, the lower limit of the airspace above us is at 3500 feet. So we should stay below that if we are if we want to fly in uncontrolled airspace before arriving to the airport itself. Okay, so here at 3500 we level off for a second. Good. And we are just overflying another small airport, I think, or yeah, here. It's not in X-plane, but here's a small airport. Okay, good. And now we will fly exactly eastwards. So maybe in real life, probably the direction of the highway is a good indicator. And I think this is the village we are not allowed to fly over. So that would be, when we are already descending to 3000, that's good. So that village would be on the map, this. So we have to stay on the right side of that. So here. And there, at the far end of that village, we would contact the tower of Cuatro Vientos. Or Cuatro Vientos. My Spanish is not really good. But that's where you would contact the tower. Or now here, you would say Cuatro Vientos Tower. I don't know what's the name. Cuatro Vientos Tower, Oscar Oscar Papa Sierra Papa. VFR flights from Salamanca to your airport. Inbound November at 3,300 feet, requesting landing instructions. And then they would tell us what to do. And most likely they would tell us fly towards the airport, join left-hand downwind, and report when report left-hand downwind or report final, depending on what the traffic level is. Okay, actually, okay, I see it on Sky Vector that actually November is here. So we are allowed to fly above this village, but not fly above that village. Probably there more rich people live and they have this right. But the reporting point is just above the highway here. Okay. And there we should be soon arriving to 3000 feet. And from there we have to stay on 3000 feet. So I will take a bit of power back. Okay, and where is the airport? Okay, 3000 feet. And now we turn towards the airport. Not climb, we have to stay on 3000 feet. Ah, there is the airport, okay. Nice. So we'll fly around to the left and then land from the other direction. And we should stay at 3000 feet before we start making our final turn, basically. So we'll join the left-hand downwind, then make a left turn for the base, and then left turn to final. And we should stay there on 3000 feet before we arrive to the turn, basically to final. Because we are not much above the airport, like 500 feet above only. Okay, so that's where the airport will be. Okay, last checks. Brakes are available. We'll make a left turn around this. Like there is another highway. We want to stay within that, but it's more or less where you need to make the left turn. Okay, let's turn parallel with the runway. So the runway is aimed to 7. We have to fly east. Okay, we are parallel with the runway. There's the runway, nicely at a good distance from us. We are flying parallel. And now, since we are already quite low, we'll not have to start deploying our flaps already where we are abeam the threshold. So the threshold is there. We are abeam. We'll only start deploying the flaps when we make the turn to the base. And we'll do that a bit further, let's say beyond this area with the houses. Let's not climb too high anymore. We need to stay at 3000, so that's more or less okay. How are we positioned? Okay, the threshold is now around 45 degrees to our back, so we make a left turn. We pull back the power, flaps 10 degree can already go out to start slowing down. We still keep the altitude. We aim to have 80 knots, 85 knots, because that's where we can deploy the rest of the flaps. Okay, we can deploy the rest of the flaps. So flaps full, landing position. And then we turn slowly final. Bit less power. We want to have final approach around 65, 70. Okay, speed is good. We are a bit high, we'll correct that. Now we are good. The glide slope is good. Now we just have to get back to the center line. Our speed is good. Okay, normally we are clear to land, so landing lights go on. Landing lights go on. We watch for our speed. We stay above 60. There is quite some wind from the left. Bit more speed. We're getting a bit low. Correcting. We're aiming for the blocks. Ooh, now there is again wind. Ooh. It's gonna be a bit longer landing. Okay, now we reduce the power. We transition and we with the rudder align and very nice aligned landing. Very good. We drifted from the center line, but we with the rudder lined us up with the runway heading, and then by tilting left, we stopped the drift across the runway because there was quite some wind from the left. So the landing was, I think, quite nice. We will have a replay, of course, after we stopped and waited as much as we need to wait. Okay, but we first need to exit here to the left. The no entry sign is from the other direction, so that's fine. And then we'll taxi for the general aviation apron. And after landing checklist is first we go from down, so we clean up the flaps. Flaps up. We stick to 1000 RPM. The transponder can go to standby. And that's it. There is not much else to do in a small Cessna. We'll taxi to the general aviation apron. The landing lights can go off too. It's a quite nice, nicely done airport. So this is the civil apron on the right hand side, and on the other side is the military apron. Okay, we'll still go a bit further. Okay, we'll take the next to the right. And then we'll find ourselves a nice parking spot somewhere. Oop. Okay, let's go a bit further because it's difficult to stop on this one. We would tell the tower or ground controller that we are very unfamiliar with the airport, that's why our movements are not so amazing. Okay. Spot 41. That will do. Parking brakes go on. There is no timer on this, so I'm just gonna have a look at the clock. It's 47. We have to wait till 63 before I can disconnect. But we can already shut down the plane itself, so that's fine. After landing, lights except for beacon lights go on, so strobe lights, nav lights, and taxi lights go off. And now there's only the beacon lights out, telling people around that our engine is still running, should they not hear it. Transponder is off. Well, now it's in standby, but you can also put it off. Flaps are up, it's already up, and the trim is back to neutral. Okay. And then we can shut down the engine. There is actually a timer here. Could have used that. Anyway, we shut down the engine. So the throttle goes to idle. And then normally you would check if the magnetos, if they are all grounded. So you turn them off for a second, and then you expect the RPM to drop, but you will turn it back on. So off. Well, it was a bit fast, but now I'm doing it with a mouse and it's difficult. Anyway, so that would be the ground check. Then you go back with the throttle to 1000. Then all the avionics can go off. The mixture goes to cutoff. And that stops the prop. And then we put it off the magnetos and we would take the key out. Then the beacon lights go off and the master switch goes off. Good. And you would also, well, at least in this manual, they ask you to put the fuel selector to one side. And then we could get out and install all the chocks and support for the airplane. And it's just sunset. So nice small airport, quite well done. I think it's very nicely modeled. All the ground is PBR and all the parkings are nicely drawn up. Also custom landing strip textures. Quite nice. So this is the military apron here to the right, and this is the civil apron. So if there is still people watching, I will show the replay of the landing in 3 minutes. If you have any questions about flying with such a small airplane or about things you've done during this flight, then this is the time to ask. Otherwise, I will already thank you for being here and following the stream. I know this flying with a small plane is not as exciting and there is not much happening during the flight, I have to say. Probably next week, if I fly the next leg from here, from Madrid to Gibraltar, it's going to be more interesting because then we can again program the flight computer and go over some procedures, maybe with the Airbus. Or maybe in the meantime, I will make a stream also with the new flight simulator. We'll show, I will see how it goes with installing things and how it works. But I think, in any case, that this was a nice flight. This was the fourth leg, again, of the pilot skills tour of the Spanish division of IVAO. There was unfortunately no air traffic control, so we couldn't do the communication, but I think I gave examples of what you would say in a normal situation if there is air traffic control. So I also tried to cover that a bit. Very nice, clear evening in Madrid. In 2 minutes I can log off from the network and I can show the replay. The landing was definitely a bit challenging because of the strong crosswind and the gusts. You can see if there is still gusts, but I felt like they were. No, now it was only 8, only, so there was a stable 8 knots crosswind from the left. So the runway is 270, so it's an 8 knots crosswind from 60 degrees, so it's still around 6 knots exactly from the side. It's not very, very strong, but still sustainable, not sustainable, substantial crosswind. Everything is shut down here, so that's fine. Parking brake is set. Everything is off. I'm happy, Mark, that you found the VFR flying also interesting. Maybe you are the only person, but it's good. At least if somebody else liked it, then it was already worth streaming. So that's always nice to hear. Okay, there was enough time now. We can disconnect and I can show the replay quickly. So we have disconnected. And then I will take the chocks and stuff off. And we can do the replay for the landing. Okay, that's enough from here. You can see that I'm really pointing to the left of the runway because there is quite some wind coming from the left. And then in the last second before touchdown, I will use the rudder pedals to align with the runway, and bank to the left to stop us being drifted to the right of the runway by the wind from the left. Here is the wind sock. You can see that there is wind coming from the left. And now you can see the bank to the left and the touchdown first of the left main and then the right main and then the front wheel. This is really how you should touch down with crosswind. I hope it was so nice in my real flight training in the weekend because I had some crosswind and my landings were not as amazing. They were alright, but I think this was better than those. Okay, let's have another view, maybe from a different angle. right? This time from the threshold. Oh, this is not the threshold. Hmm. Okay, then I will position ourselves manually on the threshold the next time. That's not exactly what I wanted. Bit strange that Explain didn't want to put us on the threshold. But it's gonna be also fine from here. What I want to show is the effect of the crosswind. So now you can see that as we are coming in, then I'm pointing to the right, and then more straightening it up and then landing. Think a bit over straightened it. We'll check it out from this angle too. I maybe used a bit too much right rudder. So now we are in the angle of the runway. You can see that initially there is a lot of pointing to the left. I'm already banking to the left and then rudder to the right. A bit too much right rudder, but otherwise more or less how it should be. And then end up a bit right of the center line, that's fine, a very big airport. But the main technique was there. So the main technique is till the last second you crab, and then with the rudder decrab, and then bank a bit to the wind to stop the wind blowing you to the right of the runway. Alright, I think with this I can say goodbye, and I hope some of you still like this, and all those people who maybe watch it later get some idea how VFR flying in the simulator in Spain is. And again, the next leg of the Spanish pilot skill tour will be from here, Madrid, the Four Winds, the airport of the Four Winds, which is actually the oldest airport of Madrid. I just read it today. So we'll be flying from here to Gibraltar, and in Gibraltar we are going to make a visual approach if the weather allows. That's going to be the fifth leg of the Spanish pilot skill tour. Thank you for joining me today, and see you next week. Till then, flight safe and bye bye.